Hello traders, Steve Gans here, and I want to provide all of you that are part of the alert service a little bit of an update on the Flyagonal results. Obviously, those results have been phenomenal at about 97% win rate and up into the mid 20,000 or so range on all of the different trades that I have made over the past 3 months. However, a couple factors to take note of. One, many of those trades had been earnings trades, and the Flyagonal in the configuration that I currently had been using it is not real good for those earnings trades because when you get an outsized move, it can get hit pretty hard. So I would say that the Flyagonal for earnings trades is not yet ready for prime time. That said, I have started researching some potential tweaks to that trade that are looking pretty favorable. But for the purposes of the analysis here today, I have excluded earnings trades specifically. So what has happened overall here on all of the SPX, the SPY, the Q trades, etc. over the past 3 months? The win rate did drop. It dropped from 97 to 94%. So still a good win rate, but the average size, the largest average loser, was bigger. We can see some of those larger losses that came in here recently. So a couple of things to make note of there. These are things I'm making notes of, obviously, as well, is I had 2 trades that essentially were opened within a couple days of each other that had the same expiration dates. And on top of that, these were both 2-lot trades where I normally only do a 1-lot trade. So that obviously was not a good scenario. I certainly need to learn from that I shouldn't be having multiple trades with the same configuration open at the same time, and especially not in larger size like that. Then there was also this one here as well. Now, I'm going to do a deep dive analysis in a separate video where I go in and I take a look at what the issue was around that trade. I do know off the top of my head that the issue was predominantly this move right here. This is over a 200-point down move that happened in a very short amount of time. Now, the fact that move happened itself wasn't really a massive issue because I adjusted the trade for that move, and that trade would have decayed pretty well if our market had in fact stayed down in this general range. The killer to these trades, to any options trade, is when you adjust, when you drop down to here and you adjust your trade envisioning that you're going to be trading down in this range, and then you get whipsawed and that market goes right back against you. That is a very difficult and challenging setup for any options trade. And so again, it was a little bit of a perfect storm here in that I had 2, actually almost 3 trades on that had a similar configuration. They were all double-sized trades, and we got this that happened during that time. So those are lessons that I need to learn from, that any trader needs to learn from. Now, some other things that I do want to share, though, that's pretty darn cool. I'm starting to do some research on all of those 75 trades that, again, were not earnings trades specifically. And I want to share with you what I'm finding. Now, 75 trades, while it's a decent amount of trades, it's not super statistically valid. So I will continue to do studies like this as that pool gets larger and larger. But what I wanted to specifically study in this particular case was adjustments, and were the adjustments that I had been making helping the trades or not? We're going to take a look at how many trades needed to be adjusted and what actually helped. My research methodology was basically I took those 75 non-earnings Flyagonal trades, took their complete P&L history, and then I looked at the ones that were adjusted. I looked at the ones that were not adjusted. And then I also looked at what would be a good threshold for making an adjustment. Again, this is only based on 75 trades, so I wouldn't consider this a massive study, and these results can certainly change over time. But what happened when the adjustments were made? And so in this particular case, we can see that 44% of the trades did require adjustment. Therefore, the 56% did not. So there was over half the trades did not need an adjustment. When the adjustments were done, did they help or hurt? The adjustments that were made did benefit these trades to the tune of $9,400 in profit. In other words, if I had not made those adjustments, the overall P&L of the Flyagonal would have been lower. But there was also something here that was interesting in that a number of adjustments that I made, or I would call minor or small tweaks that maybe didn't need to be made, and those actually had a little bit of a detriment factor to the overall trades. So another thing that I wanted to ask is if I didn't adjust anything, what would have happened? In other words, if we just let those trades play out to when I closed each of them and had not made any adjustments, what would have happened? Well, the P&L would have been about $5,000 worse than it actually was. So where does that leave us in the overall scheme of things? I compiled this particular graph, and in this particular graph, the blue line here is the actuals from all of those 75 trades. The green line is if I never made an adjustment and just closed those trades on whatever the same closing day was that I closed them anyway. Where would that have put us? Obviously, that would have been a fair amount worse. And then the final thing is, what if I used a more selective adjustment process? In other words, I'm trying to define those exact criteria, whether it's a delta criteria, P&L criteria, etc. In this particular case, if at any point the trade was down 10% at the end of the day, because we only have end of day data for all of these analysis, but at the end of the day, if the trade was down 10%, if I had only adjusted under those scenarios, then the overall P&L would have been significantly higher. Again, only 75 trades, so this is not what I would call super statistically valid, but this is the path that I'm on to try to continue to define and refine what's going to be in the class content when I put out the Flyagonal class here. Again, I'm shooting for about 10 to 12 weeks, and I'll have much more detailed analysis, and these numbers could very easily change by that time. But again, I want people in this community to understand the path I'm on, what I'm looking at, and where I hope this will take us all in the future. So take care, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I don't necessarily have answers yet to all of these questions, but I will do the best I can.